thing that we did, having parked the aeroplane and shut it all down, was to then go through all the paperwork to see if there was possibly anything anywhere in it that might have given us any pre-warning of some sort of phenomenon that caused what happened to us.
Every time, because it's going to come back to us.
The damage to the 747 is extensive. From the outside, the crew realized that their windshield had been deeply scratched. They see bare metal showing through where the paint has somehow been stripped away. And they still have no idea why any of it happened. When investigators uncover the cause of the disaster, Flight 9 changes pilot training around the world. During a calm flight to Australia, all 4 engines of a British Airways 747 suddenly stopped working. After a long, terrifying descent, the crew managed to restart the engines and land.
That's amazing.
They spent an excited and largely sleepless night in Jakarta before returning to Halim Airport to inspect their plane.
And we went back the next day to look at it in daylight. The aeroplane had lost its sheen, and in some places it had been sandblasted quite well, and all the decals and the paint had come off. It really was very little to see until they stripped the engines down.
The engines were manufactured by Rolls-Royce. Their investigation was led by a former engineer, Malcolm Grayburn.
3 of the engines were removed in Jakarta following the incident and were ferried back via cargo aircraft to London Heathrow and then transported to South Wales, where the engines were in fact stripped down into piece parts, and it was there that I got involved.
Grayburn was stunned by what he saw. Much of the engine was badly scratched and scored. Grayburn discovered the engines were choked with fine dust, pieces of rock and sand. When it was closely studied, they learned that the debris was clearly volcanic ash. Days after their harrowing flight, the passengers and crew learned that the night they were flying, there'd been a major eruption of the Mount Galunggung volcano, located just 160 kilometers southeast of Jakarta. Tom Casadevall is director of the U.S. Geological Survey and has studied the Galunggung volcano.
Indonesia is the world's most volcanically active country. It has more than 130 historically active volcanoes, meaning volcanoes which have erupted in the last several thousand years. Galunggung erupted explosively early in the 1980s. In April, May, June of 1982, the eruptions became increasingly more powerful.
The eruptions were large and the damage was extensive. More than 60,000 people were evacuated from the area around the mountain. The night Flight 9 flew nearby, the volcano erupted again. As the ash cloud rose more than 15,000 meters into the night, winds pushed it to the southwest, right into the path of British Airways Flight 9. Never before had a volcanic cloud seriously affected an airplane. Could the ash really have crippled this flight?
Roger, declare emergency.
Mayday, 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 Speedbird 9. We have lost all 4 engines.
Unlike ash that you might see in a chimney or after a fire in a forest, this is not soft material at all. This is very fine, ground-up particles of solid rock and minerals. This material is very, very abrasive. It's very angular in shape. If you were to see it under a microscope, you would see very sharp angles. And so that's what caused the abrasion.
In addition to sandblasting the windshield and all the leading edges of the plane, could the ash cloud explain all the other strange phenomena the passengers and crew had experienced?
Remember, the aircraft is moving in close to 500 miles per hour as it's flying into that cloud. Even though it's a very fine material, it can still cause abrasion and friction on the skin of the aircraft. Because it's such a dry environment up there, that frictional electrification produces the glow that we refer to as St. Elmo's fire.
The electrification also caused the interference in communication experienced by the crew.
Speedbird 9, you have lost number 4 engine?
Some of the volcanic ash that was sucked in and ground up by the engines was also blown into the plane. And when passengers and crew saw it swirling through the cabin, they feared the worst.
You're a passenger, you're looking out the window, suddenly you start breathing this sulfur-laden air in the cabin, and it probably is a choking, probably a shocking sensation. It's essentially a house of horror.